says 50% 8 o'clock now.
Oh, now mine says 70.
Hey, that's the only job you can be wrong 90% of the time and still keep it.
I know it.
Or a politician.
This is all ready to go and filming, so whenever you're ready.
Are you got your computer?
Yep.
Ready?
All right, we will go ahead and call tonight's meeting to order. Are there any changes or adjustments to the agenda?
No.
If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the agenda. All of those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
ESC County empowers all students to become productive, responsible citizens of an ever-changing global society. We'll take a moment now for public input on any non-agenda items. Okay. If there's no comments, we'll go ahead and move on to John's report.
Yeah, the financial report's in your packet. I'll take any questions on that. And then a second comment would be, once again, the city of Sacs asked to do fireworks at the elementary as we have in the past for the 4th. And that's all pretty much taken care of. We got their insurance certificate and everything, so that will be taking place again.
Do you need a motion?
Nope, just information, so if you hear about it, you know.
Okay. Any other questions for John? If not, do we have any other correspondence?
I think there was a thank you card, a nice thank you card written by one of the associates,
It's on your desk.
and so it just, then also for those who retired this year, we presented their gifts, building principals did, and I think Friday we're gonna have a little luncheon for Dave. He wants pizza, so we're gonna have some pizza for him, and a few of the teachers that I'd worked with in the past, I went personally to their houses and thanked them and had a nice visit. So anyway, we take care of that, and I think the staff were appreciative. But that's it, I don't know anything else.
All right, we will go ahead and move on to administrative reports. Is Sarah on the call?
Yeah.
Okay. Turn it over to you, Sarah.
Sarah, are you there?
I don't, I'll see if you can hear me. I can't hear you, but can you guys hear me?
Give her a thumbs up, yes.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know what's wrong with my computer. I even restarted it so I could get my video to go, but I can't hear you at all, so I'll have to end up calling Kevin. I'm assuming my board report is what's up, and so I wanted to make sure to say out loud a big thank you, not to only Steve and his crew, but with this move, we are almost, I would say as of today, we're probably 99% done, besides some maybe a bookshelf here or there, if teachers wanted, a few whiteboards. But Trish Schreier, Gretchen Hoffling, and Kevin Zender have been there almost every single move to help direct things. They really know what's kind of help keep things moving when I'm busy all the time. So thank you to them especially, and then we've had some others show up and just really pitch in when, just help us out. So Eric, Todd, Dallas, and Michaela, I appreciated those, that they helped in to clean, move, all that. So it's kind of somewhat of a wrap around the Sac City building in places, as you know how it goes. Gets worse before it gets better, but it is getting there. The second one, I just wanted to let you know that I did call out to families that took out open enrollment papers, just to kind of get that feedback. It's nice to hear straight from them. So I'm working on a few questions that I can answer for some families as they make their final decision. I think it was worth the time to go ahead and reach out and make that personal phone call. And then the last one, preschool registrations, we're going to start calling families and just remind them to turn in their packets. We have over half of them in, but like I called a family and they said, oh yeah, applications, so hopefully those will keep rolling in. And I won't be able to hear you if you ask me any questions, I guess.
I know I was gonna have a question. Do you know how many, students we had interested or attend a preschool sign up? Just, do we have any idea on total
I don't know
numbers?
about the sign up, we were still looking around 40-some
I was gonna say
students.
43, I think is.
Mhm.
Okay, I was just curious.
You want me to ask her?
That's fine. That's a rough estimate.
Well, how's her staffing? I know she was looking for a preschool teacher still,
Yeah.
but still.
She's interviewed a couple of people, I do know that, and one person turned us down. And then her second interview, she and I briefly talked yesterday, so I don't know whether that person accepted it or not yet.
Good. And then otherwise, everyone else is full for
I think our teaching positions are pretty well full, it's associate positions that we're gonna have to tackle next.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Benny?
Yeah, not a lot from the middle school. The 27th, we did the hand back, the student locker hand back, any possessions that they had. Went very smooth, had great attendance. You know, for the first time doing it, I was a little bit nervous of how that was gonna go, but traffic flow was smooth. We got people in and out real quick. They just drove up, gave us their name, handed back their computer, handed bags back. We probably had 45-ish bags that weren't picked up, you know, total, but we got most of the computers back.
Did you get some more?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So, thought that went really well for us. This time of the year for principals, for the most part, it's doing some finalizing state reporting and moving on to planning for next year, so that's kind of what we're doing. You know, the big part of this is the reentry plan, that the district has to come up with, so, that's gonna be pretty much our summer work in prepping for what fall will look like, so.
And I'll pigtail off of that, I think Kevin and Danny have printed the documents for the return to learn there. And so that's the information for the Department of Ed that we have started with. And the committee's met 2 times now, and we're gonna meet again on Thursday. And we've decided as a group, we're gonna focus in on the health and safety area first on Thursday. And we'll see how that works. So we've invited some different staff members, heads of departments and teachers that'll be a part of that. Of course, Jackie is the nurse. And then once we see how that process goes with that group, then those other groups below that, the educational group, I don't remember all of them off the top of my head, the behavior group, we'll bring those in as a group also. But as our understanding is you have to have a health and safety plan in place that gets approved, that's their first priority. The rest of things, even though we have to submit it by July 1, the rest of it's fluid, it can change, so just kind of FYI where we're at with that. Danny and Kevin need to be thanked, they're kind of taking the lead on that, so I appreciated that. They organized the first meeting and you know, your TLC coaches, and we're getting people involved. It's the first meeting, we're expecting a full day for the health and safety group, and hopefully we can make it a little quicker with the rest of the groups, but we'll see how it goes. So anyway, that is in place. You know, a great deal of debate on what happens. We all hope that we can have school like normal, but what happens if it somehow we either have students or staff members who get COVID-19, and if we have to follow some guidelines, how long you have to close. So you have to have in place, I think, a chance either for a hybrid system where possibly some kids may be here, some kids may be at home, or if it's such that it's an online system that would be required though this time, not a voluntary system like we finished the year.
Has the school looked at thermometers and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about some different kinds of thermometers. That was the first thing that Jackie brought up. She wanted to know if some places that were gonna take temperatures twice a day in the morning and then at noon. My fear was that if you don't get everybody, first of all, I didn't know how the manpower being able to do that. Then John brought up this great idea, you can have these nice, when they go through the door, where it would take your temperature.
Oh, yeah.
They're a little spendy. We could spend our CARES money on that, I guess. But again, a lot of the information that I'm hearing is, you know, many people don't have a temperature, so it's not 100% you got a temperature and therefore you're gonna don't even have any symptoms and they test positive when you look at the meat packing industry.
Some of the research I did when it comes to kids, now I don't know about high school kids, this was more elementary and middle school. 99% of them are not, they can't pass it on. So, I mean, I think that looks promising to, you know, maybe there's a chance school can go back to normal.
I'm still concerned about busing though. That's number one concern. And you look at kids, but my age of my drivers are 70 and 80. So they are in a high risk group. So that is something where we're trying to get some guidance. What do you do for busing? Do you have to limit the number of kids on a bus? Make some requirements for people transporting if they can? We don't know yet. So we're developing this plan, but we really haven't gotten tons of guidance from the Department of Ed of what you can and can't do. I know with baseball and softball, you have to provide busing, but you also, they opened it up that if parents want to drive, you can let parents drive their kids to games. But I think there's, if you try to go every other seat, you can get about 11 or 12 kids in a bus total. If you go every seat, you could get 20 or so. And then I heard today, which I had not heard before, that if you have every seat filled, then they have to wear masks. The kids have to have a mask on the bus. So I don't know if that's true or not.
Is there a way to put some kind, you know, like you go to grocery stores and all this and that, they've got the partitions up. Is there any way you could put like a snap thing, just to kind of segregate the bus drivers?
I don't know if anybody's come up with that idea or not yet. We can certainly check.
I mean,
One of the things Jackie wanted to do was have the bus drivers take their temperature, because she said if they get on the bus, it's too late by the time they get to the school to take the temperature. And I said, oh boy, I don't know how people are gonna feel about doing that.
you know, then you get a bus driver that gets it, and then you're,
Yeah.
We bought a thermal camera system or whatever for the courthouse, and we were pretty much guaranteed that it was gonna be reimbursable by FEMA, so.
Oh, really?
I would assume that it would be the same thing for schools.
We have not heard any information or I haven't.
What's it, $2,500 maybe, 2,200?
Is it a
You have to have a laptop that goes with it, but I mean, you know, laptops, whatever.
is it a flirt camera?
I have no idea about that, but there's two little things looking at you or whatever when you go in there and you have to stand behind the line. The problem would be, not so much problem, but I mean, there's not a lot of people coming to the courthouse. There's gonna be a lot of kids coming in school. It didn't take long, you stood behind the line, he said you're fine or you're not, but the price I don't think would be a big deal. It'd be just whether or not it's workable, you know, if you have a long line of kids standing in line to get into school because they're getting their temperature checked.
And how do you control the entries, cause like in this building, you've got people coming in from,
You have to, we talked about that, you have to have one entry place, we need three minimum then for our 3 buildings.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, so we've talked about that, but we're just trying to muddle through it the best that we can with the guidance that we've got so far, so I just wanted to give you an update that we are working on it, and the first area is health and safety that we're gonna really tackle.
Well, Doc Bullock is the one that we went through on this whole deal, and he said, he talked to his FEMA rep or whatever it would be. He said it was for the courthouse, it'd be FEMA reimbursable, so I'll text him right now and see if it'd be the same thing for schools.
Okay. I didn't wanna take all of Kevin's time, is he around? Is he on? Can he hear us?
Kevin?
Yep, I just got a few things to say. First of all, you're kind of talking about softball and baseball. I had a lengthy conversation today with head coach Jason Phillips on baseball, and they're trying to just really kind of maneuver through getting ready for those games. There's going to be, we'll have 4 home baseball games and 7 home softball games. And so he's putting together, and I believe Steve Newsom doing the same thing. Jeff mentioned that parents can drive students to the games if they so desire. So he and Steve are putting out basically questionnaires that are asking students what are kind of their plans. So he has an idea of who or how many he's going to have on a bus and how we're going to get that figured out and who's going to be driving. So they said it's been a challenge. obviously, as they're practicing and stuff like that, to keep everything sanitized and stuff like that. They're using a spray basically when they get done with bats and stuff like that. The challenge really is, you know, they're sharing some of the helmets and stuff like that, so trying to keep them sanitized. So, but he said the kids, they sent out 24 forms in regards to just kind of what the expectations were with COVID-19, and Jason said he got all 24 back very quickly. So I think both our boys or girls are excited to have the opportunity to participate in sports this summer. So, but anyway, so you know, it's going to be kind of a work in progress as we all figure this out. We're getting daily updates from the Department of Ed and the different associations about how to deal with COVID. If somebody comes down with it, what's the protocol and things like that. And really, it's about working with your local county health departments if something does happen, and working with them to make sure we follow the protocols that we need to when it comes to that. But like I said, talking to Jason, he's pretty positive. He feels like he said the boys want to play, and they're going to try to do what they can to make sure they do it right. So, and I think in many regards, this is kind of a test run for how things might look in the fall with fall activities as well. And I'm sure Iowa, all the eyes are on Iowa right now to see how we do and if we see any spikes or anything like that. But I'm happy with the numbers, 24 and 28 respectively. Those are good numbers for our softball and baseball teams. A couple other things, kind of piggybacking off Denny, we did have the 9th, 11th grade students come and pick up all their belongings and stuff like that. We had all but 2 show up, so we were really pleased with that. I think we've got 1 computer that we have to get back yet, so really things went well. A big thank you to various staff members who helped make that happen, and also parents and kids who dropped off those materials. After prom, last Wednesday, Belle Babe, Molly Stott, Laura Wright passed out after prom prizes to the students from 4:30 to 6 on the west side of the building. So even though we didn't have prom, they still wanted to make sure that they got those prizes and stuff like that. So a big thanks to the after prom people for helping out and making that happen to give some semblance of kind of a prom thing. So I think that's all I have for my report. If you guys have any questions, I'll entertain any.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yep, thank you.
I just have a couple of items. I've been talking with Chris Rodman over at the City of Wall Lake, and they do have some interest of having a joint board council meeting. And we looked at some dates in June. I'd thrown those out, and then I think there was a baseball conflict on the one date. So Chris and I have talked about moving it back to July. So tentatively, if you look at your schedule, July 27th is a meeting. They have 2 meetings a month, so it'll be their second meeting of the month. That we would try to do it ahead of their council meeting. And so when you look at your calendars, if you have a conflict, let me know. But I'll let Chris know, yes or no, if that's a date that we can potentially go.
Does the City of Wall Lake have any interest in buying the building?
That's what they want to talk about. I do think there's some interest, but I've only been talking to Chris, so he can't speak for the council necessarily, but I think, yes, there is interest. I do know that they have looked at some options of other communities that have gotten property of a school, and so that's one of the things. The other thing that Chris brought up to me, and I didn't really realize this, but in talking with Steve and John, the district also owns the baseball field. So the football complex and that is city-owned, but the high school baseball field, which used to been for Wall Lake, that is school-owned property. So those are 2 pieces of property that we would own, and I'm guessing that they would want to have a conversation about both. Then back to so we know baseball and softball started, so we got guidance. The governor passed a proclamation, and it was only for baseball and softball. So you can't have weight rooms open, for example, yet. Well, yesterday or the day before, the Girls and Boys Association sent out some new information. Schools now could have open gym if they want to have open gym, but they got to follow all the social distancing, set up the coach, and a coach can monitor an open gym, but they can't be coaching during open gym. And so I had originally thought everything was gonna be closed till July 1. In some of my other schools, I know that we're looking at some protocol to allow open gym to begin, for example, next week. I don't know if you have feelings, if we just wanna say we're gonna wait till July 1st here and see what we can open up then, or are you okay with allowing some open gym if the coaches will establish protocol? For example, if you're just shooting baskets, one kid to a basket, they'll sanitize the basketballs after practice is over. So it's a little easier during basketball probably than some other sports.
Does that open gym policy include weight rooms also?
No, you still cannot do weight rooms. That was very specific.
I'm okay with it.
I am too.
I am too.
Okay, well then I'll have Kevin get a hold of Telly, and we'll talk to our coaches and see if we can't, and we'll send out what protocol that we're trying to establish before they would be able to begin. So it would probably be, well, this is already Tuesday, at the earliest the end of this week or next week before we'd have something established.
And I would be in favor too, as early as we can get those weight rooms open, get kids in there, because they're falling behind. I know there's kids out lifting weights.
I know, but I don't think we can do that till July
no.
1st yet.
No, I understand
Yeah.
that, but as soon as we can, I'd like to get that going.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, the gym will be open for school-sponsored, like this is not including any non-school events, like non-school open gyms, because I know that.
Well, an open gym technically is
Could
an
be
open
anybody.
gym. Anybody could come. You have to post it as an open gym.
Okay,
And it's really not designed just to be basketball, just so people understand
Okay.
that.
just wanna make sure. I did, some of those other practices and
Yes.
other things, I just wondered
Yes.
if that would fall in that or not.
And the associations have allowed camps. So if our volleyball is gonna have some camp from another college, you can still do those kinds of things. So there's some things that are allowed, but they're very specific about weight rooms and sunflower seeds. No sunflower seeds.
What about pickles?
No concession stands. Remember at baseball and softball. So if you go to a game, bring your own water, bring something to drink.
Bringing popcorn too.
And popcorn.
Alright, anything else? Alright, then we'll move on to our discussion items. I think the only item for tonight is the design and construction timeline discussion.
And this is really a carryover from last month, so the construction timeline, Ron had put some ideas together, so they're trying to develop plans. And then I also have included some information about an alternate design that we've talked about at the elementary. And so if you read my this and that I sent out to all three boards and just some general information, Brent has talked about, let's do this right, and I agree with that, but I also want to make sure we do something, because I really think that this is an opportunity for us to improve our facilities. We've made the decision to go from 4 buildings to 3 buildings with the ultimate goal of getting to 2 buildings. And so, and this part where what Brent is saying, I don't want to build something and we look at it when we're done or in the building process and say, we wish we would have thought of that. Now, I can guarantee, once you get 4 or 5 years out, you can't think of everything in it. You maybe thought of something different by that time. The problem that mainly that Sarah's coming up with, and it's a little bit bothersome for me, but we're short of special education space and title services. And so that was one of the reasons we talked about, all right, maybe we make that a 5th and 6th grade wing instead of a specials wing like we've originally been talking about. And we could save some of those renovation costs in that center of the building. But in the end, it really didn't save any. It actually increased the costs in the center of the building because we were short room space, classroom space. We didn't have enough title, enough special ed. And when I say it's bothersome to me, I just want to put this into perspective for you. So we're looking at now 5 special ed classrooms, 4 title classrooms. And when I say classrooms, we're not talking a classroom like this. We're talking much smaller space, okay? 300 to 400 square foot. But on the flip side, talented and gifted, we have 1, teacher we share between the district. So the bothersome is we're putting lots and lots of emphasis on our title and special ed. And don't get me wrong, we need supports there. But it seems out of whack when we're 9 to sharing of a title, and that doesn't count what we have for special ed and title services or intervention services we have at the middle school and the high school even. So, but I also don't want to build it and we don't have space for whatever the needs of our kids are. So the last number that Ron gave me was about $4 million for an elementary project. And then you're at about 6 million here, just shy of 6 million if you did the original bid plus the alternative 6 classrooms, if I remember correctly. So we're approaching a $10 million project. So when we get down to that voter PEPL, I'll talk more about the financing because that's an actual action item then. But is there any question about the timeline or the design phase, what Ron has presented?
I have a question on the design area that for the 4 special ed rooms in the title. So do we have that many instructors all the time that would fill all 8 or 9 of those spaces?
I don't know the answer to that. Can Sarah hear?
Yep, I can hear now. Can you hear me? I switched to my phone.
Do we have that many instructors where those rooms would be full all the time, Sarah? Title and special ed?
Yes, by the time we have 5, 6 there, see, I'm thinking ahead to what we have currently, and then when we add 2 more grade levels, where we would be at.
Okay.
And so, yes, all those positions are filled right now.
And she brings up a point, you know, we're planning this to, right now it's a K-4 building or pre-K4. It would be a pre-K through 6th grade building.
Where's this option A and option B and option C that I'm looking at here? Where is that proposed to be?
Those were probably earlier ones, Brent. I didn't reattach those.
Okay.
Where would they be attached to that elementary building?
The same spot.
On that wing that's gonna,
Lunchroom.
Yeah, off the lunchroom there. Whether it's specials rooms or a 5th, 6th grade wing, whatever, we're still looking at building out that way.
So it'd be the same format, the same kind of rectangle, it's just divvied out. Okay.
So then under that plan, some of the existing space in the middle would stay as is, like the library or?
Art room. But also there could be some remodeling down there for those special ed hubs or those title hubs would end up. So there might be a small piece that needed to be out in that wing, whether it's title or special ed, but we need a little more space for that.
Would band and choir be in the same room?
No,
They would, okay.
the choir would stay where it's at, and we would still be building an instrumental or a band room out there.
Does that, I'm trying to remember, we've been through so many drafts, but like for the library space, were we getting a larger space?
Not a lot larger, no. It was gonna be a very similar size space. Yeah. One of the benefits originally though of using the current library, you could have special ed kind of close to the office, some of those peripheral type services that we were looking at. But no, it wasn't gonna change the size much. In the classrooms, we could downsize the cost a little bit. I think he was planning on about 900, a little over 900 square feet for those classrooms. You know, you could make them about 800 square feet. But in this, hate to say it, but in this environment that we're in, almost more space is a little bit better just if you're trying to space your class out. You don't want to make them so small that you could maybe only get 6 or 8 kids in a room if we have to go to this kind of hybrid version.
Well, I don't want to design a school because of this virus. I mean, that's just crazy to me.
But
I understand your point, but I'm just sitting there
I understand too, but I think you want the rooms workable. I don't think you want them so small. Yeah, we could say we want to squeeze them to be smaller, and then we're not happy because they don't give us flexibility to do cooperative learning or other things, maybe when COVID gets over, Brent. So we can talk more about the vote and the numbers then if you want to, or I certainly can take more questions about the design.
And that process will continue, right? Then the board may see something in July,
Mm-hmm.
so.
Well, my concern is that I appreciate doing the right thing, because I think we gotta do it once. Appreciate all that, but we got deadlines and timelines, what we're gonna try and ask the public for extra money for. If that keeps changing, I don't know what, you know, I mean, we sit back and say we're gonna do a band and choir and arts room and library, and now we're showing them classrooms. When we have to have this pebble vote in July 20 what?
24th or 3rd.
So
Yeah,
we
so
got
it-
6 weeks.
But for the Pebble vote, you don't have to say what specific the rooms are, Brent. You could say that we're planning on classrooms, but you don't have to say it's an art room or a fifth or sixth.
No, I get all that, but I think that if you're gonna get the public to vote on it in a positive way, you better tell them what the hell you're spending your money on. It just can't be, oh, trust us, because this board doesn't have a lot of trust.
I feel like people wanna see like a draft on what our idea is, that's what people I've talked to, they've asked, can we see a draft?
But that part wouldn't be by July 24th.
Mm-hmm.
That would be, you know, we'd have at least an extra month.
That's true,
That's true. You're
yeah,
right.
that is true.
So just to put my 2 cents into, the reason that we did try to look at this for another option was because when we started putting actual pencil to paper, fitting everybody in every room, I couldn't figure out how I was going to fit 5 special ed and 4 title people sharing rooms in the smallest of small areas. And we have tried every little nook and cranny to find that space, and that's where this came about, because with the original Fine Arts Edition, in the existing part, I was still having trouble finding space for all of those teachers.
I do think that's something though that maybe you could help us as a board to, I mean, if we continue with the idea that that's a specials wing, you just heard her say, we're gonna have to add some other space out there, whether it's title or special ed in addition. Or you make it a 5th, 6th grade wing with possible a little bit of title. There's gonna probably be some title out there or special ed out there no matter what. You know, and in our design meeting with the art teacher, she's really pretty happy with her space. She would like a kiln, but she goes, my space is workable. Going back to the library question, we're really not changing the size of the library. It's basically the same size. So I was hoping we could save some remodeling costs and put it on the addition out there, but it didn't really do that. Actually, it increased the remodeling based on their numbers.
It just seems like in the existing library, there's that large area that's kind of shut off from the space that the students use. It seems like it's a lot of space in there. I mean, it's not your typical office size, so, you know, that seems like a smaller space if you have, 4 sections or 3 sections of students, and I don't know how they do that as far as library time, but it'd be a lot of students to get in that space.
And we were hoping to be able to kind of put special ed, but it's not big enough to put enough special ed within that area though either.
How much room were we short? Like when you were penciling this out, if you went back to that original drawing that we had where you had more the fine arts wing with trying to space that out, how many rooms or how many spaces were we short?
What were you short, Sarah?
I would guesstimate a nice size classroom or 2 smaller classrooms that could be shared, if I recall. I'd have to go back and look, because we've gone through so many scenarios, but right around there. The problem with special ed is they need a lot of equipment. I mean, we have from preschool, so we're talking people, or kids that need like hands-on manipulatives, clear up to big people so we have big equipment that's coming in as well. So those are, the special ed rooms need a little more room for all the things that they have to do to accommodate for our students.
And we've tried to be really creative. I mean, we've got space in that building we don't utilize very well. Let's look at those locker rooms, for example. They're not used much. Most kids don't dress out for phys ed, is my understanding. A lot of them wear their regular clothes for phys ed. But we still need locker rooms for ball games. So we have a basketball game there, for example. But really, that's the only night activity that utilizes that space would be basketball, right? And junior high volleyball. But we try to figure out how could you use some of that space, but you really can't make it a classroom during the day and have it be a locker room.
And we've taken we took a janitor's closet away from them. We have rearranged so many rooms now to get everything to fit now that when Ron was here, we looked at every nook and cranny and everything is being utilized. We've even had to change our conference room now to possibly be, with this COVID, another place for sick kids to be in if they're running temperatures, so they have some ventilation. So even things like this COVID are going to play a part as well.
Ready for the consent agenda?
Sorry,
That's all right.
thinking. All right, we will go ahead and move on to the consent items. I don't know if there's any questions or comments on any of those items.
So we had the two hearing minutes from April that I missed last month, so we've got 3 sets of minutes, board bills, no policies right yet.
No.
And then also included is, 2 sidewalk bids, so
Where are those at?
I'll let Jeff.
We got 2 bids for sidewalk, and one bid was around $9,200, and the other one was about $9,700, if I remember correctly. So this would be what we talked about by the track.
Oh,
Okay, coming in the entryway and kind of around the edge of the track and a little patio type area where people could, wheelchair people and people could use. So my recommendation would be to accept the low bid of, again, $91,000 or $9,200. I think Boost Construction had a low bid.
so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the consent items. All of those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next up is the voter PEPAL ballot.
Okay, so after the last meeting, I worked with our attorney to draft a sample ballot, so you should have the sample ballot there, and I used $1 as a starting point. Again, you can go clear up to $1.34, and anything less than $1.34, so you could do 1 penny if you wanted to. $1 would generate us, if I remember correctly, around $3.5 to $4 million. Well, he put this in a note that depends on what interest rates were. You know, 85 cents, if you could get a 2-year interest rate, you could do about a $3 million project. If you had 90 cents at 3%, you could do about a $3 million project, and 95 cents at a 4%, again, a $3 million project. So at $1, depending on what interest rate, you could probably do a little over a $3 million project with voter PEPAL, which unfortunately, based on where potentially are with the bids, wouldn't be enough to do, for example, the whole SAC. One of the things that Matt put in his notes, he does not really like to cross fund. So, because one of my questions was, can we fund parts with SAVE and part with PEPAL? And while you can do that, then there's 2 sets of paper. It's going to cost you more for some of the paperwork because you're going to pay part of it out of the 1 cent sales tax. You're going to pay part of it out of SAVE. So there's a little extra expense if you do that. Then there's a sample resolution that if we want to move forward tonight, that the board would approve that resolution. Also, there's a resolution that the board can approve You would not have to do that tonight, but you also could, that says the board is supportive of this project, and so we could then promote that with the or publicize that to the community, that the board is in favor of asking the public for this voter PEPL. Started working on a brochure, and I think Brent, you had sent a note out with a couple of suggestions. One would be that if we didn't need to tax the full amount, that, you know, each year the board would evaluate that. I don't remember how you worded it, but something to that nature.
I didn't swear in it, did I?
No, you did not swear in it.
Good.
But there would be an annual review of the needs, basically, is what you would put. And then also a late thing, if you looked a couple days ago, Matt Gillespie added a market report, so that's a link, the last link there. And he talked about just with save dollars and the uncertainty, which I think we all knew that the economy is certainly slowed down a bit right now. And so I think we've been talking that on our own. We don't want to maximize, clear out with save and not be able to do other maintenance that we need to do or technology that we need to do. And so depending on the interest rate, yes, you could have possibly gone up to a $10 million project, but that would not have allowed you money for other kinds of things, in my opinion. So then he just gave you some information. This is repeat from last month. But a PEPL vote would be a 10-year vote. We talked about that it has to be a property tax only question for the portion that you're going to borrow against. You can have an income surtax and property tax, but you cannot borrow against the income surtax amount, only the property tax amount. And so what I've said before you was a property tax question. And what you can consider, again, is anywhere up to $1.34, but I just used the dollar that I heard last month. So if we're going to have a vote, Brent and John have already talked about this. If we're going to have a vote in September, we have to have it to the auditor 45 days, I believe, prior to, which is July 23rd or 24th. It has to be there by noon on that date. And so if you would approve it tonight, we certainly could begin to let the auditor know what it is. You could still do it in July, as long as we had our meeting before that date and we had it then to the auditor by noon.
Well, I think it's something we need to do. Looks like the numbers are coming up that we can't do it all with the 1 cent sales tax, so, or at least can't do both projects and still have money to operate, so I say we put it to the public and see what the public comes back with.
At what rate, Brent? You want to stick with the dollar, or do you want to do the dollar?
Makes the most sense. If you stress if we don't need the dollar, we won't tax the dollar. I mean, that's kind of the way I look at it. It's a clean, easy number, and it just makes sense to me. I guess if somebody else has a better number, whatever, 99 cents, I guess, but just well say $1.
Is the dollar gonna be enough with what's going on in our society today with the COVID? So, 1 cent sales tax is gonna be way down.
1 cent will be down. As I said last month, whatever rate you set for property tax, whether values go down or not, you will get enough to cover what you owe for the debt.
I mean, I understand the idea of cranking it up to $1.34, but all this money has to come from the taxpayers one way or the other. I mean, it's coming from you if you're getting it from the sales tax thing, or it's coming from you if you got property. You know, somebody's paying these bills. So I say go with $1 and see what happens. If you ask for $1.34, I really have a hard time believing that the people are gonna vote for the dollar. I really do, certainly in these times, but if you ask for $1.34, I think you're just killing it before it even starts. That's my personal opinion.
I do know, just talking with people, they seem to have more money in their pockets right now because they're not out going out to eat. I mean, that kind of stuff, so. And I mean,
No, I'm Dutch, you're not.
But, I mean, I think it's something we need to do for our kids.
I appreciate you saying that. Remember when I interviewed here, I think no matter what happens, I certainly can support doing the voter pebble and seeing what happens. But I think we need to do something for our kids with our facilities. And I don't wanna be held that we don't do anything if it doesn't pass. So that's maybe where I disagree a little bit with Brent, because I would like us to do something. Cause my feeling is if we get something done and we have to do a second vote or more, people will support it if they see something that they can be proud of. And so I would love to see us go forward with some project no matter what. But again, I do think we have to make sure we're very cognizant of what that project is. Trying to think long-term, how do we get to 2 facilities? And we don't wanna cram them in like sardines, I understand that. But I think we become the most efficient in 2 buildings, at some point in time. I just don't think one building makes sense for us personally. So I would hope, how do we get out there in these times? Brandon brought up a point, and I think they said that they could do this in some kind of a virtual drawing, so that way we could put that on the web so people could see what it potentially is gonna be. But then we have to be able to go out and talk to people, all right? What is this dollar going to give us? In that brochure, I showed you our tax levy rate. We're low compared to state average, here. And we're lower than we were 5 years ago by about 60 or 70 cents, if I remember correctly.
63.
The one other thing that you would have to pass if we move forward with this, to use save dollars. Remember, there's a resolution that the board would communicate to the public that says we intend to use save dollars for XYZ project. The public, even though that's 1 cent sales tax, they could petition to go to a vote. Recall? And so after the board approves that, there's a 14-day waiting period before you could move on. But the legislation is looking at changing the law right now, but the current law is it's 30% of the last election or 100 votes or something like that, whatever's larger. Well, at our last election, we had approximately 2,000 people vote. So there would need to be at least 600 signatures to bring the petition before us.
So we need a, can't think of it right now, to move forward.
What tonight you're moving forward is, are you gonna pass a voter PEPL resolution, as well as you could also make a board resolution endorsing going for a voter PEPL, okay? And then once you do that, we will get that sample, well, I'd say a part of that resolution is the ballot, but we'll get that ballot then to the auditor by July. Well, we could get it here in June yet to the auditor and have plenty of time.
So we need a motion for.
I think there's a resolution of election in their packet. That's what would need to be approved
Right.
to move forward. Or is there something else?
Well, then I'm just saying as a board, you have the option to do a board resolution that says they endorse having a voter PEPL. That's just something that the board can, in the brochure, we could say, the board, the ESAC County Board passed a resolution endorsing moving forward with a voter PEPL.
But the first thing we would wanna do, Jay, is approve this resolution of
Correct.
election.
Correct.
And before you do that, I would just note that right now it says $1, so if the board wants that to be something different, state that in the motion, otherwise,
Correct.
if you approve this, it will be $1.
I would move that we do the PEPL resolution at $1.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve them.
And it's roll call.
Okay. And so, John, if you wanna just go ahead and roll call.
So motion and a second for the resolution of election. We'll just go alphabetical. Mark,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Jackie,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
and Brent.
Yes.
Motion carried 5-0.
Do you you also wanna pass a resolution that the board endorses, so now the board is endorsing them. We're telling the community as a board, we think this is a good thing to do.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion and a second to approve the resolution of endorsement by the board. Roll call vote on this,
Yeah.
John, or no?
Yep.
Oh, you-
Yes.
So we'll move down to one. Lori, you're first.
Yes.
Jackie,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Brent,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah.
So maybe one other question, is there need to be a smaller subgroup or some groups to try and organize getting information out to the public as we move forward, or what's your recommendation on how we organize that, or?
One, it depends on the group sizing that we are able to do yet, because that's a little different than what we've done in the past, but I just made it known that, board members, myself, one of the things that I did, I attended every council meeting in the school district, so Lanesboro, Yetter, all the little schools, I went to those council meetings. And then any group that was willing to have me or a board member or administrator come to, we spoke at those. Sometimes there were 6 people and sometimes, there were 20 people at a meeting. We also held 2 board meetings though for the public, in which Ron came, showed the ideas for the public, and then people in the audience could ask questions about the drawing. And when I say 2, we did one in Rockwell, one in Lake City, so at a minimum here, you might wanna consider 3, Wall Lake, Lakeview, and Sac City. But those are things, and they were regular board meetings then, and pretty much, there was just a little bit of information that I presented, the board didn't present a lot, and then Ron pretty much did most of the information, then it was just a Q&A if people had questions.
I personally think that would be a good idea for us to try and do, if the sizing allows for it. The other option we could maybe do, which would be tougher to ask questions, but even if Ron could do some sort of Zoom presentation where he could bring the drawings up and walk through, maybe take questions online. I just think there might be some good opportunity for people to see it if we can get those scheduled.
Absolutely.
I really liked the way they did the preschool, program thing. I thought that it went so smooth and we could sit at home, and I thought that was great. And it was a PowerPoint, so we got all the information.
Okay.
Then they could save it, so if someone wanted to watch it later, then they could watch it later or rewatch it to get, so I think that would, even if we did something like that, if it didn't allow us to
Yep.
get into a big group, I
Yep.
thought, or maybe even just doing it for the ones who don't want to come out, the older population that maybe doesn't wanna come out, but they want the information.
I think there are groups of people that you don't wanna forget. For example, kids who are off to college.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they've been in the system right now, but teach them about taking their civic duty. They can do absentee ballots if they would like. So that's a group of people. We were really proud of at South Central. I can't remember, but I got a call from the auditor that night just saying, I just want you to know that we're so happy that so many people showed up to vote. And I said, our whole intention was just to give people information. They have to make their own decision. Some are gonna vote no just because it's a tax increase, but we wanted them to make an educated decision. Those who are gonna vote no, probably you're not gonna just persuade those mind. But there were a lot of people that are on the fence, and if they knew what it was for, you could try to get them to be in favor of it.
All right, anything else on that item? Now we'll move on to the next one, approving the junior high National Honor Society.
This was from last month. Denny and the teacher presented this, so if we decide to have a junior high National Honor Society, there was a $385 admission fee or in that area.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the National Honor Society at the middle school. All of those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next up is the milk, bread, and fuel bids.
So we received bids for those. I believe there were 4 fuel bids. Then there was again, I'm going off memory, about a nickel difference between that and the second bid, or 4 cents, one of those two. And then is it Bilbo Bids, Bread?
Yeah, Bimbo.
Bimbo, I always get a crack out of that name, Bimbo, and then Anderson Erickson for milk, I believe, would be the bid.
They're the only two that serve.
So I would, and some other companies we'd contact and they'd say we're not in your area, so we wouldn't get bids for them. I know for the fuel bid, I'm gonna recommend the low bid, for the fuel bid, and then Bimbo and Anderson Erickson.
Who's a low bid for the fuel? I can't find it.
Johnson Propane.
Yeah, Johnson Propane.
Where are they at?
Out of I Grove, I believe.
Battle Creek.
Battle
Okay.
Creek, yeah. So, Johnson had bid it last year, but they wanted prepay, and we said we wouldn't do that. And so their bid this year is, monthly terms or pay as we receive it, like the other companies, so.
So is, just out of curiosity, Al's Corner, that's local, right?
Well, that'd be, there's, I
At the
think their
corner
office is just south of, south of Auburn,
Yeah.
right?
Rita area.
That area.
Okay.
I think what I call the local feral gas person would be out of Carroll. I think that bid came out of Carroll somewhere. So, and then Star Energy, we've had Star Energy for years. We bought our tanks and stuff from
Who did we have last year, John, do you remember?
Star.
Star.
I'm like Jeff, I like to go with the low bids. So move.
A motion, okay, is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the low bids as listed, all of those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next up is the handbooks. for
So
student-
we have one, this is a student handbook that you're doing tonight, you'll do a staff handbook in July, but each building principal made edits, sent those to Dunita, so she's compiled those edits. And then a late change came yesterday, I believe, to align with COVID-19. The temperature in the old handbook had 100.6 and the new regulations are 100.3. And instead of being fever-free for 24 hours, it'd be 72 hours. But if you have any questions, Danny or Kevin or Sarah could address the changes. I don't think there were any big changes that I recall.
Any questions on that? If, I just actually, I thought of one, if they would change this recommendation from 72 hours back down, because they've been moving this number around frequently, is that something we would be able to adjust
You
accordingly?
can change a handbook at any time.
Okay,
So just at the next meeting, we could adjust it.
So move.
is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the student handbook, all of those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next up is the locker bid for the elementary school.
Okay, so storage space. So most of us probably went to school in our elementary. We're used to having hooks on the walls, or maybe cubbies, or maybe nothing there. I don't know. But I hate coming back to COVID-19. They don't recommend that anymore, having hooks in those cubbies. And so we are looking at lockers, and we're going to try to take part of the lockers that were in the Wall Lake building, in the art room and the preschool room. So on that main level, there's about 40 to 50 lockers that are usable there, and we'll use those. And then we would order lockers that would cover currently just through the grades that would be in the building. So if at some point in time 5th and 6th would get there, we would have to have more lockers as part of the additional students. And again, Steve got 2 bids, so I don't know if he included both or if he just we included the low bid, I think is what we've included here. The other bid was substantially higher, almost double. So we could still get those ordered, and they're kind of a standard locker. We could have those in place by the time school started if we decided to order those. So they would be half lockers, so there'd be a lower level and then be an upper level.
Would we be approving the installation, or would we be installing them?
I think it would be best if we had it with installation, but if you wanted the district to do that, they're kind of tedious as far as just time. There's lots of bolts and things to put them together, but Steve's recommendation was that we would include the installation.
It says here though, in that bid, that the lockers are to be put together by the customer. If it's done for we have them installed, they put them together?
That's my understanding the way it was. I'm not 100% on that, Jay, but that's how I understood Steve.
Prices quoted are based on quantities shown and include delivery to one location, unload, and assembly by customer.
But then when there's an installation price, I think that's the other part. So if we're gonna do it, that's the first number. But then the install price, is there another number below that, Jay?
Yeah,
There's
Yeah,
6500.
6500.
Then it says it does not include blocking, bracing, or bases. That could be another $40,000. Well, it could be, I know how to bid stuff. So I'm just saying.
These are all going on block walls, right?
Yes, on the block walls.
Well, I mean, is it supposed to have bases? Are they, if they're not, doesn't have a base, does it just sit on the floor?
Well, the way I understood him was that they were gonna be on legs, so the ones that we were gonna do were not gonna need a base.
It
But you're
says in
saying,
there that says with 6-inch legs.
yeah, so it has legs. The ones that we would have to build our own bases are the ones that are coming out of the Wall Lake building, and we would just build a little 2x4 or 2x6 base.
Cause it does say closed base at the top too, after the lid.
Yeah, it had a base, as I understood it.
I mean, my motion would be that we have it with the installation, because I think custodial staff's gonna be busy enough doing those other ones to get them over there, to get them
Well,
done.
There's a lot of work yet to do, and, you know, the one benefit of COVID-19, we've got, like Sarah said, we've got a lot of the Wall Lake building moved already. We would have been just starting that now, so we're ahead on that part.
Well, I wouldn't think, when I'm looking at this, if I'm thinking they're just metal, I don't think there's gonna be any blocking, they're gonna screw them straight to the block.
Correct.
Correct?
Correct.
Bracing, once it's screwed to the block, I don't see any bracing needed, and if it's got bases already on there, then I would assume the 6500 probably covers everything. Been wrong by assuming things before, but I just don't wanna see that turn into 12
Yeah.
grand.
Yeah, I
That's,
understand.
that's my concern.
I'll make a motion, we buy the lockers for the price quoted, plus the installation that's quoted.
Is there a second?
Second.
There has been a motion and a second to approve the bid for lockers, including installation. All of those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alright, last are personnel items.
We had one associate resignation, and then we have a number of contracts, a middle school math teacher, Brent Harm, the Schedule B contract for the new vocal music teacher. Randy, is it Mose? An elementary teacher, Michelle Schreck, an associate, Linda Stamp, Alexi Brewster, Shelley Peterson. These were all associates. An ELA teacher, Jenny Stock, and then our new special ed teacher is willing to do the middle school student council. We had a resignation there, so Wade Fridley. I'd recommend approval of those resignations and contracts.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the resignations and contracts as listed. All of those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Do you know how many associates we're still short?
Lots.
Okay, hey, we will bring it up again.
6 or 7 at the middle school. Kevin and Sarah and I were talking the other day. I think Kevin said 2, kind of pending, because there's a couple that are, they don't know exactly what's gonna happen with them that he had last year. And I think Sarah said 2 or 3 for her too. And that's right now, who knows, Jay? You
That's,
know
that's
what,
even,
yeah, what'll
that's even
happen.
after these.
Yeah. And we had an ad out or a text alert out the other day, and it's on the website too. I'm not sure what day that was that we put that out,
Wednesday, Thursday.
yeah, but we haven't had any responses yet, so. I checked right before we came in. So that's concerning.
How many were we short all year this year?
I can only speak for us at the middle school, we were 2 short.
2 associates.
Yeah, so we were double booking a couple of our 1-to-1 associates, which wasn't helpful the very high needs. Some of them we can do that and be fine with, you know, cause their needs aren't that heavy, but others just, it's tough.
And then those ads, do we include minimum salaries now? Because that's something, you know, the board did move up salary information, so.
And that's a great step, yeah, that's a great step in the right direction.
I've heard more about that than any other item we had in the school board. Was it
Good or bad?
good?
Good.
So maybe if we run that a couple more times.
Yeah, we're gonna have to, I think, yeah. And we didn't know what, you know, again, COVID, we didn't know what impact that would have, would that maybe generate more people because of,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
And I think
unstableness of
people are still
employment.
trying to figure out what their jobs are.
Right.
People are just starting to go back to work and.
Any other board reports or communication, future agenda items?
Well, there's a Rising Hope, that's a contract that for some students who go out of district for services, some special ed students, that was a continuing contract, we've done that this year. And then, I don't know how you've done that here, John, but safety equipment, you can transfer that and pay for that out of the general fund, or you always pay for safety equipment, like football helmets out of the activity account.
It's been out of the safety fund, and then board approved each payment.
The board has been approving that as we go, so it's done then.
Yeah.
Okay.
And our next meeting date is,
What would
just
be,
to make sure,
The third Thursday is what we're looking for. It'd be the 16th.
And when did Wall Lake wanna meet, the 27th? When was that?
Yes,
27th,
27th.
it's a Monday night.
so the 16th here again.
it's fine with me if that's okay with everybody. Now, I think on July 1, I think there's a little more opening of space, so it depends on, you know, you have to have a room that can, 50% of capacity. So this is really about capacity in this room. We couldn't have many more people than this. The library, we could maybe have a few more people if we move back up to the library.
I'm just thinking with the elementary maybe being kind of
Yeah, I don't think that,
moving things around, it might not be the best environment for them to have to worry about a board meeting this
The
summer.
other thing we could do in this building is the board could sit in a small gym.
Yeah, that's got capacity like crazy.
It is air conditioned and the bleachers are always, they're built in.
Only problem might be being able to hear everybody.
Would that work for you or not?
Not really, I won't be here that board meeting anyway, so you need to get to do that one.
Well, then we'll have a meet of line.
So the 16th at 6 o'clock here, is that right?
Yep.
and would you want, does the board want to see the Wall Lake building before we have this joint meeting? Or is that not something that's important to everybody, because you could possibly have the meeting in Wall Lake
It's fine with me.
here, or to have one at Wall Lake?
We'd have Wall Lake.
That's fine.
Then at least everybody could see the building, cause I don't know if Mark's been in the Wall Lake building at all, and you were in it one time with the tour with us, but I think it would be at least so we could see what we're talking about, so before you had that council meeting, you could, you know, we could kind of, and then if you didn't have a chance, we could show you where the baseball field is. It's, you know, it's a big complex out there that the school owns also.
So when would we do that, the 16th, or, okay?
Yeah,
July 16th, 6 PM at
6
the Wall
p.m.
Lake School. then.
Okay.
Wall Lake School, okay.
That sounds good.
And then July 27th, if it works for everybody.
it would be at the Wall Lake School also. The only thing we'd have to do is make sure Steve's got some tables somewhere, we can have some tables set up.
We'll get it done.
Anything else?
Motion.
Is
Move to adjourn.
there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.